All right, welcome back to the Contrarians. We are back at it again. We have another fun panel discussion for you. This is certainly going to be an interesting one. We are talking about Hager, Schoen, Aronson, Shreve. Hopefully, I pronounced that right. Also known, I guess, as HSAS, which is a supergroup that was featuring Sammy Hagar, Neil Schoen, Kenny Aronson, and Michael Shreve. So we are going to be talking about the album, their only album, called Through the Fire, which was released in 1984. It was the only album they ever produced. It's recorded live with some overdubs added later, I believe I read. So it's really quite a unique album. We got a super group that released one album. It's recorded live. Really, really cool. If you like these sort of discussions, if you want to maybe suggest topics, there's a Patreon that you can join. If you just like watching the videos, you're in the right place on YouTube. Like and subscribe, all that good stuff. There's other ways to support the channel in the description as well. But with all that out of the way, we're just going to dive right into it. I'm going to thank all of our panelists for being here, and we're going to go to John the Music Nut. So let us know what you think about Through the Fire.
Okay, thank you all for having me on here today. HSAS Through the Fire, a dark horse album of the hard rock genre. I love this album. This album came out in March of 1984. At the time, Sammy Hagar was coming off of the Three Lock Box album, which had that huge hit, Your Love Is Driving Me Crazy. Neil Schoen was coming off the Frontiers album with Journey, and it was another huge hit for the band, giving them 4 top 40 hits in the United States, including Separate Ways, Worlds Apart, and a wonderful ballad, Faithfully. This album is heavier than them. On this album, Neil Schoen and Sammy Hagar recruited Kenny Aronson, who was a wonderful bass player, who's played with everybody from Billy Squier, Billy Idol. He currently plays in the Yardbirds. He played with Bob Dylan for several years. And they brought in Michael Shreve on drums. Michael Shreve played on the first 7 Santana albums. A lot of people know Michael Shreve for that wonderful solo at Woodstock during Soul Sacrifice when he was only 20 years old. But he's also played with Pat Travers, and he's also played with Freddie Hubbard, the excellent jazz trumpeter, who was a legend in jazz music. This album was recorded live, as Nick indicated, and this is because of that live recording. There's a lot of conviction in the performances. Back at this time, you didn't hear the bass guitar very well on rock albums, but Kenny Aronson, you can hear very clearly on this. He's playing with a pick. He's playing with a very heavy, chunky sound. Him and Michael Shreve are a wonderful rhythm section on here. They're playing for the song, and they provide the perfect amount of space for some of the more atmospheric tracks. As for the songs themselves, Top of the Rock is the opener. Top of the Rock, in my humble opinion, is the best rock song that Sammy Hagar has ever been involved in. And he's made some great hard rock songs, whether it's Space Station Number 5 or Bad Motor Scooter with Montrose. On his own, he had There's Only One Way to Rock and Red, and I Can't Drive 55. And with Van Halen, he had great songs that really rocked, like Pound Cake and Don't Tell Me What Love Can Do. I'm talking about the rock songs here. I'm not talking about the ones that had some keyboards and some pop elements in them. But Top of the Rock is heavy. They play with vigor. It's just a great anthem, a fantastic song that didn't get played. It got played a little bit on the AOR stations, but this song kicks ass and takes names. It's a fantastic song. It still sounds great. It doesn't sound like something that was left in the 1980s because of production. The recording is very well done. The fact that it was done live, again, that really adds to it. Top of the Rock is fantastic. Missing You is one of those great Let's Get Back Together songs. It's excellent track on here. Neil Schoen, throughout this album, what I always say about Neil Schon is he always played for the song. He played those solos that you can sing. On here, he's more of a shredder. I mean, he's just having fun. And his performances on here really stand out. Excellent track. I love the bridge in this song as well. It's a very catchy track. Next song is Animation. When I was talking about sense of space, this is a song that's heavy and it very good use of space in it. It's very atmospheric and dramatic. Sammy sounds great on this track. And it goes right into Valley of the Kings. Some of the solos by Neil bring me tears and bring me chills to this day on this song. This song is heavy. It starts out it starts out atmospheric because it's basically Sammy singing, and then the band comes in, and it's a lot of call and response. It's an excellent track. I mean, it is a little bit different. It isn't a riff rocker at all, but it's just a great performance. And Giza is basically the end of Valley of the Kings. It's just 1:22 when they go into a little heavy ending and they just say Giza at the end. Whiter Shade of Pale was a cover of the Procol Harum standard. They do a good job on there. It's not going to replace the original because the original is a timeless track between Gary Brooker's vocal and Matthew Fisher's organ. The organ really gave the original a pastoral feel to it. Here, Neil Schon does the organ parts on his guitar, and it sounds very good. Sammy sings it well. It's not the original, but it's still a pretty good version. The next few songs are good, but it's the performances to bring them up. Hot and Dirty is really cool, and that's probably the first instance that you hear that you can indicate that it was recorded live. He Will Understand. That's another excellent track. That's another one that has a lot of drama. Sammy sings this one very well. At the end, you can hear the crowd in it because this was recorded Westwood One, but there was an audience there. They took the crowd out of most of the tracks, but at the end, they kind of left them in. You can really hear them at the end when Sammy does his a cappella vocal at the end. Well, I shouldn't say a cappella because he's singing over Neil's guitar. The last song is My Hometown. That's decent. It sounds like a BTO song. It's got a very meat and potatoes rock and roll quality to it, I should say. But it's a very good song that ends the album. And to me, this album has aged very well for some of the reasons that I indicated. Through the Fire, this is definitely an album to pick up, definitely check out if you like the heavier songs by Journey and the heavier stuff by Sammy. I would give this a 9.
All right, awesome. Well, great, starting off strong. Thanks, John. And John, I believe you said that you're going to have to leave early in the episode, so we'll thank you again for the review and for being here.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to watching the rest of the show when this is on YouTube, and thank you all for having me again. Take care now.
Thanks, John.
Hey, John. Take care.
Have a good show.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
All righty. So we're going to keep it rolling. We're going to go to Nick next. So Nick, we'll hear your review for Through the Fire.
All right, good. Just a little overview. This album came out, I think, midway through '84. I grew up not far from where John grew up. I think I'm a little older than John. I'm not sure, but just knowing that this album and the singles off it, Whiter Shade of Pale and Top of the Rock, were played a lot on the classic rock radio station, which also handled the modern stuff too at that time. And those songs were everywhere. So I know that the album sort of sold sort of moderately in spots and places, but in my little corner of the world in Pennsylvania, this thing was given a lot of attention. And Top of the Rock was a great song. I was a youngster at the time, if you will, trying to figure out hard rock and metal, and this song seemed to like straddle those two worlds. And it was a pretty heavy song, and I did enjoy it. And I also liked Whiter Shade of Pale. It's a bit of a stripped down version of it and modernized for the mid 80s and I love the original. I love Brooker, love Matthew Fisher, but this has a little less pomposity, if you will. So I like their version of it. But the thing was odd because, after a month or two, the album seemed to disappear. And in prepping for this today, I found out that, there's only a few shows done in 84. They didn't tour the US. Everybody went their separate ways. And that was it. It was like the one and done. So, after those two singles, and I think Missing You may have gotten some airplay in places, the thing was gone and never to return. But at the time, for the few months that it was around, it was like an important album, at least in my corner of the world. And I know that the band got some coverage in magazines and things. So for me, growing up, in '84, when I was discovering heavy metal, and of course, I still love Kiss. This album was, and this band was right in there. Learning about what a supergroup was, didn't know much about Sammy Hagar. That guy from Journey is on here, and I thought he also had heavy guitar. And frankly, the rhythm section of Aronson and Shreve, Michael Shreve, he's fantastic, and Aronson. In prepping for this today too, I stumbled on a couple things that were interesting, in that Hagar, I guess, has an autobiography out there, and he sort of slagged the rhythm section, and he called them underrated, he called them overrated. And I don't know, Sammy, sometimes he takes shots at David Lee Roth, called him goofy, he says things, and I don't know, Sammy sometimes may need to kind of like zip the lip and take a step back, because that rhythm section is unassailable. I shouldn't have to defend their resume, but Michael Shreve is a monster, and Kenny Aronson's a monster, and the two of them were monsters by the time this supergroup came together. If you want to knock the rhythm section, the problem was I read that this whole thing came together in 3 weeks. They get together, they rehearse, and they're basically doing shows. It's very difficult, even for pros, to get out there and probably hit their marks like they'd want to hit for a live recording with just 2.5, 3 weeks of time together. And I checked the set list, and from researching, I know there's songs that didn't make this album, but they played about 15 songs live, only one of which the crowd knew, Whiter Shade of Pale. And that's a tough thing to do too. You're playing stuff no one's ever heard before. And you guys know yourself, you go to a live show, you might hear 2 or 3 songs you haven't heard or know well, but 15, that's a tough thing. And, I assume the shows went well, but, that's just a tough thing to do. I know, and Nick said it at the top, and John may have said it, the album is alleged to be recorded live at these shows, and one song has the crowd noise in it, and I think it's Hometown, and that one song, I think, may have the most energy on it, pound for pound, with the other songs. In one of the interviews I found online through Ultimate Classic Rock, Kenny Aronson sort of seems a little miffed / bitter about this album. He suggests that a lot of this album may not have been recorded live at the shows, but recorded at sound checks, because the live recordings may not have been up to scratch. So there's a little bit of maybe controversy there as to where these things were actually recorded. But if the songs were recorded at the live venues or live performances, and they took out the crowd, I think they're missing something there. I think you missed that energy. If we're playing the drinking game, it seems like every episode of the Contrarians, I mentioned Humble Pie, but the story goes that Rockin' the Fillmore, they took the crowd noise out, and it was a very sort of sterile recording. And then the manager had the bright idea of putting up the ambient mics to hear the crowd, and voila, you've got a classic recording. So if that was the case, I understand that if this was done at soundcheck, you wouldn't have a crowd unless you piped it in, but they may have missed something there. But overall, I really like the album. I think doing a tribute to the bass player from Black Sabbath was an odd but interesting choice. Giza. But I wish it could have gone longer. It was only a minute 20, but Giza's great. And some of the songs, and Tim could correct me, some of them were like AOR type leadings. They're really good. Missing You, I think, would have been a great single. And frankly, they beat Bon Jovi at his game in that song, maybe a year or 2 or 3 years before Bon Jovi hit. That's like a Bon Jovi song with the chorus and the guitar. It's a really good song. And I think that may have had some legs out there. I don't find anything particularly weak on the album. Hot and Dirty is like one of those songs that I think if you were going to parody a heavy metal band in the 80s or have a metal song on a teenage movie soundtrack. It would sound like Hot and Dirty. It's a little primitive. Lyrics are kind of silly too, but other than that, it was like guys who don't play metal were trying to like figure out what metal was. But other than that, the songs are pretty, I find pretty pretty up to scratch, even considering that they were only worked on for several weeks. I think if I was going to add another criticism, the songs probably could have maybe been fine-tuned or edited with the song doctor, whether it's choruses or bridges and that kind of thing, like really technical stuff, but that's kind of nitpicking. I'd probably give this album an 8. I do like it. I will say this, it's been a forgotten album. I went back and I heard it. I'm glad this topic was suggested because I went back, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about this. This is really good. Why it didn't stay in my consciousness, I don't know if it's because it fell off the radio radar and you haven't heard much about it since, but it's a good album. It's a solid album. Anybody who likes this kind of genre of music and the guys involved, you should definitely pick it up and check it out. I mean, there's no reason why you wouldn't. It's that solid.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Nick. Great review as always. So we've got pretty high marks here for this album so far. So let's see what Tim has to say about it. Tim, Through the Fire, what are your thoughts?
Well, this album is interesting for a lot of reasons. I'm really, really glad we're talking about it because nobody ever talks about this album. I think that there's a few reasons why it kind of came and went very quickly. I remember in the late 80s when I was first starting to buy music, and I was way into Van Halen at that point, so I'm trying to find all the Sammy Hagar solo stuff, which was not easy to find, particularly his earlier stuff on Capitol. But this came out on Geffen, but there was I remember reading about this album, but it wasn't until 93 that I found a used cassette copy of it because it was hard to find. It was deleted. And eventually I found the vinyl and they reissued the CD. That what I've got is the reissued CD that came out in sometime around 97. Kind of like the design on here, but this is actually not the first time it was on CD. Grant did a great episode on Grant's Rock Warehouse about what he called the Target CDs, which are the early WEA CDs. And you can find a copy of Through the Fire on one of those. So it came out early as a CD. I think that there was a certain amount of confusion about the name because like John said, Sammy's coming off of Three Lock Box, which was, it was a second gold album for him after Standing Hampton. He had a top 40 single. His solo career was really just beginning. But when you stick this out, it's like, well, what does that even say? It's a cool logo, but what does it even say? It's like Hagar, you need something people will grab onto right away. And there's that little bit of, cognitive dissonance, I can't even say it, with the name. But a good album. It's just interesting. I file it right in between Three Lock Box and VOA in my CD collection because it's essentially a Sammy album. He and Neil Sean have been friends forever, so it was a no-brainer for them to get together. Although I understand, if I'm to believe how they presented the story on the Behind the Music on Journey, that this was kind of the last straw for Steve Perry before he said, "Okay, that's it. I'm doing a solo album," and the band was never quite the same after that. And even though it was on Geffen Records, I think if they'd have put this out under Sammy's name, it would have done more, but that just wasn't how it worked. Now, the liner notes say that this album was recorded live by the Westwood One Mobile Facility November 9th through 21st, 1983. I'm not sure if that's every single day, but that was the time periods, and then additional overdubs at Fantasy Studios. It's an interesting album in that we'll go through it song by song. So Top of the Rock, yeah, killer opener. It's just a great Hagar rock anthem, and he's got a few of those. This one is no exception. The idea of the songs being recorded at soundcheck, Missing You, I agree. Missing You should have been a single. Missing You should have been on one of Sammy's solo albums. I think it would have been a hit. It's really catchy. I think it might have crossed over to top 40 radio. It had everything. It had all of the elements that you would want in that type of song. But I have to think there's some serious overdubbing going on here because there's quite plainly harmony guitars and a rhythm guitar underneath. And I know Sammy's a perfectly fine guitar player, but any pictures I've seen from this era, he's just got the microphone. So there's no way Neil Sean could have done all that. So there's some serious overdubbing going on this song. Not to mention background vocals. I mean, Sammy's background vocals are in the stratosphere. So but that's fine. I think I like the experimentation, the idea of, hey, let's do something no one else has done or very few people have done. Let's go out and record a bunch of new songs live and take the crowd out. So we've got the energy of a live performance. I think that was probably the idea behind it. And as far as Sammy commenting on the rhythm section, yeah, I love Sammy to death. He's one of my favorite rock and roll guys. He's one of my favorite singers, but he never refuses a microphone in his face. And sometimes he does talk too much. Because, and I think maybe what the real problem might be with Kenny Aronson and Michael Shreve was that they were overqualified for this job, because there was nothing particularly complicated about this music except the whole Valley of the Kings, that like there's a lot of weird time signatures in this. So they might have been overqualified and just kept it real simple. And maybe Sammy mistook that as not being into it. I don't know. And obviously Neil and Michael had played together in Santana many years before. Top of the Rock, great song. Missing You, great song. Both of those songs I could hear on any of Sammy's solo albums from the 1980s. I could have heard those on Standing Hampton or Three Lock Box or VOA. When you get into Animation, Valley of the Kings, Giza, I kind of mush all of those three songs together. Now we're getting into stuff that kind of reminds me of when Sammy would get a little more quote unquote serious in his Van Halen days on songs like Pleasure Dome and The Seventh Seal. That's the vibe I'm getting from here. So these don't sound like Sammy Hagar solo songs to me. They sound like some of the early 90s Van Halen songs. Yeah, Whiter Shade of Pale actually hit number 94 on the Billboard Hot 100. So it was released as I would imagine Geffen probably said, I understand you guys want to do this with all new songs. Throw in a cover of a really popular song so radio will have something to latch onto. I like what they do with it. They go full on power ballad with it. And Sammy sings the hell out of it as usual. And Neil's a melody master. He can shred with the best of them, but his melodies is one of his biggest strengths as a guitar player. It's what makes those Journey classics shine, because you can sing those guitar solos. And I like how he interprets the organ line with the guitar, especially how he does the little finger tapping thing to the little I don't know if you call it filigree or whatever you call it, but it just adds to it. Again, the name recognition. As someone who has radio experience, how do you announce this band's name on the air? It's awkward. So I think there's a little bit of that. You know what? Let's just put that aside. Or if we play it, we just won't backsell it, or we won't say, here's the latest from. We'll just play it in the middle of a bunch of songs. I think there might have been a little bit of that. So people that might have wanted to buy it was like, well, it sounds like Sammy Hagar, but it's not on any of these Sammy Hagar albums that I own or find in the store. Hot and Dirty. Yeah, that's Hot and Dirty. That's like a Spinal Tap song. But again, Sammy, one of the digs that people make at him are his lyrics. This is the same guy. Actually, this is the same year he wrote a song called Dick in the Dirt. So I just think that, this is Sammy in that mode. That sort of, I'll say it, that sort of bonehead, macho rock and roll kind of mode. Musically, I like it. Musically, this might be a stretch. It almost reminds me of Y&T. But then again, Meniketti always did kind of sound like Sammy Hagar vocally, but I don't know. This kind of has a Y&T feel to it, but maybe that's just me. Now, He Will Understand is interesting. He Will Understand is the only song that remotely reminds me of Journey. And it's mostly because of Neil's melodic picking. It specifically reminds me of a song on the Frontiers album called Troubled Child. That's the vibe I'm getting from this. It's really interesting. It's an interesting arrangement. It's kind of has ups and downs and peaks and valleys. Yeah, this is a really interesting song. This one doesn't sound, this isn't one that I could easily stick on another album by any of these people, except maybe if you had Steve Perry on vocals, then it would sound like a Journey song. My Hometown's a fun rocker that ends, the whole thing. And yeah, it's quite obvious this one's live. Sammy at the end is my hometown, And, of course it would be, right? They're playing the Bay Area, Neil as well. I don't know about the other two guys. So in the end, you've got an album that I don't think Geffen promoted very much because, later this year they put out VOA, which was Sammy's biggest album at that point. It was his first platinum album and his most successful album as a solo artist. It had Can't Drive 55 and, established him as a headliner, the Red Rocker. And of course, what does he do? He joins Van Halen, 2 years hence, and then Geffen are like, just when this guy was breaking for us. I don't think much money was spent on the promotion of this album. The only thing I'll say about the name to add to it, I think it's kind of interesting that many, many years later, when Sammy Hagar had Chickenfoot, well, that was also HSAS because you had Hagar, Satriani, Anthony, and Smith. Of course, Chad Smith didn't do the tour for the second album, so they get Kenny Aronoff, would be huzzah. But yeah, a really good album. And I forget about it. I like Nick said, I forget it exists sometimes because it's in that weird. It's in his Geffen period, which is Sammy's hit making period, right? He never had any gold or platinum albums. All those Capitol albums he put out, like 5 or 6 albums. And then the Geffen years were the big years for him. But since this wasn't in his name, it just didn't get the recognition. And in Sammy's autobiography, which is a good book, it's called Red. I think it came out about 11 years ago. He said that he had I Can't Drive 55 at this point. But he said, I had it and I never presented it to Neil. And he said, I wasn't being cagey. I just said, this is a song for me. And I think it's because he kind of knew that, what, this sounds like it might be a hit. I could hear this on the radio. It's going to get buried if I put it on here. I think he should have kept Missing You. Or I think he and Neil should have agreed, look, let's keep this for my next solo album proper because this sounds like a hit single to me. Like, I'm really surprised if he had like John Kalodner, the famous A&R guy at Geffen. I'm surprised he said, don't put this song on this album. It's a hit. You're never going to get anyway, whatever the case is. A good album, worth rediscovering. Also available on 8-track, which I don't have, by the way. Yes, this exists on 8-track. And I'm going to give this album a solid 8 out of 10. I really like it.
Good.
Awesome. I like the unique little perspective there, the note about the DJ experience, and it's something I don't think any of us would have thought about.
It towards the end of, like, because I'm mostly a behind the scenes guy on radio, towards the end of my, when I was at a pop station, it was getting harder and harder for me to know how you're supposed to pronounce the names of some of these artists because they're just letters. There's no vowels a lot of times. And so I would just not. And if you're trying to promote something, you want people to say, have you guys ever seen copies of old albums? And maybe Nick remembers they did this in the late 80s on the hype stickers. I think Atlantic Records, it would say, when you play it, say it.
Yeah.
That's, they wanted the DJs to say who's doing this song that you just heard or are about to hear. HSAS has no ring to it whatsoever.
No.
Yeah, it's a weird, and it's even, some things roll off the tongue. Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. It rolls off the tongue. Hagar, Schoen, Aronson, Shreve. You got to think every time you're going to say it. And I know who's in this band, and I still have to think about it every time. So, they kind of messed up there. Although, again, I will say I do like the logo. The logo is kind of cool. Kind of a nondescript album cover too. It might have done better if they'd have had themselves on the cover. So maybe somebody would have seen that and be like, "Oh, that's Sammy Hagar. Oh, that looks like the guitar player from Journey." I don't know, but there you go.
I agree with you, Tim, and I seem to recall. I might even have old air checks, but I seem to recall that the DJ would come on and have to like give this long-winded explanation. And HSA, it's Sammy Hagar and Neil Schoen, and so you just want to kind of rip through it.
I can picture myself just saying, "Yeah, it's Sammy Hagar" or "Hagar Sean." Or just say it keep it real simple.
Right. They weren't shying away from the term, or at least what was out there, supergroup, because I know that was drilled into my head too. So knew a supergroup, boom, done. The one thing I saw too, although I couldn't find verification of it, they did indicate that after it came out, they did a few more shows in '84 after the album came out, and they had a rhythm guitar player on stage as well. But I tried to find it on. I think I missed it on Setlist FM. I found the shows and the set list from '83.
That the songs made up the recording.
Correct, right. And then
a couple things. Sorry, a couple things I did forget. I do know that, yeah, they did do other songs. There's one of them. One of them was called "Ever Since You Came." I've heard of like a bootleg version of that, and
Right.
another song called, I don't know what they called it originally, but it ended up on Sammy's 1999 album Red Voodoo, called "The Love." This is the
Right.
love. That's got a Hagar Schoen co-write. That dates back to these sessions.
Yeah, I did notice too. You were mentioning that it's all the songs on here were all co-writes except for Whiter Shade of Pale. So it was Sammy and Schoen. So I know how they divvied it up. I know one thing that Aronson was a little miffed about. He said they pulled me away. I was working with Foghat and I was down in Florida recording, and I get these calls saying you got to come out to the Bay Area because we want you involved and we're going to give you a car and then a place to stay and 25%. So he was all, this is my big break. And he goes out there, and of course, then there weren't any plans afterwards to tour extensively with it. And so, even though he got his foot in the door and was going to get 25% of the deal here, nothing materialized. But I could see Sammy too, though. Like, yeah, I'm only getting 25% of this. Maybe we should hang on to some of my A-list material for something later.
Well, that, and he had a career. Neil
Right.
had a career.
Sure.
I'm sure Michael Shreve was on to the very next thing. So,
yeah,
and almost like you'd almost have to think about it and go, wait a second. I know enough about Sammy Hagar to know he's building momentum. He's not going to want to stop up and form another group now. You do that after everything fizzles out or something, or you get kicked out of the band.
there had to been some communication there that maybe Aronson's misremembering, because they have the cycles, and they said Sean's on the road all of '83, even though they've been working with Sammy. They mentioned that Danny Carmassi was the original drummer, so then he joined Heart because Sean's on the road. So Aronson had to have known. And this reminds me of Black Country Communion, when the album was wanted to be worked by Glenn Hughes, but Bonamassa is like, I got guys.
He can make more money. His name is worth more as a solo artist. It's got more marquee value.
Plus it was made known that I can give you this much, but I can't give you 6 months or a year. I can give you this. So so I understand. And by the time these guys would have been freed up to do it, it's probably 1985, and Sammy's off to do things, and Journey's in disarray. So I completely understand.
Yeah, I think that I've even read that in those interim years between '83 and '86, because Steve Perry does a solo album in '84. There's no touring behind it, but it was a double platinum album, and he had a couple big hit singles. And in '85, I've read that Neil Sean was talking with John Entwistle about forming some sort of thing and have Eric Martin sing.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. And then Eric Martin apparently said he ran into John Entwistle years later. And John Entwistle says, I've never met you before in my life. So, but, that could be, there could be some clouding of memory there. But Eric also had a chance to audition for Van Halen when Sammy did, but he said he chickened out. And he also had a chance, he also auditioned for Toto. This is before Mr. Big. So, when you look at the deeper careers of these guys, none of these things happen in a vacuum. Would have been interesting if Carmassi had done this, because that would have been like half of Montrose again, that classic lineup. But of course, Carmassi was smart to stick around with Heart because they were just about to hit their big comeback period too. So this album just kind of sits right in between, and it's just kind of a time capsule, really, but a pretty good one.
Yeah, right. And I was lucky. The fact that I heard this on the radio, those two songs on the radio a lot, now I look back and I'm like, it was really, as a matter of fact, I don't know where I got this vinyl, but this was not hard to find back in the day, including used record stores.
I've only found it one. I happen to have a Canadian copy, and if I've said this before, if you see ones that have that maple leaf on them, that's WEA in Canada. That's how from 80 to 84, they put the maple leaf up in the corner. But I've never seen it since. And, and I wouldn't have had the CD if they hadn't reissued it. I remember, it was early 97. Boy, if my memory serves, I think I bought Marching to Mars by Sammy and this the same day, because I saw them both in the H's. It's like, oh, this is on CD now. And I know it's a reissue, other than the fact that it says, distributed by Universal as opposed to distributed by Warner Brothers, but it also says www.geffen.com. So I know this is not an 84 original.
Yeah, right.
All right. Well, awesome. So we have I don't want to call this a dark horse album, because it's the only album they made, right? So like, how could it be a dark horse?
It is kind of it's a dark horse album for Sammy for sure.
All right,
And
there we go.
And I bet you there's a lot of fans of Neil Sean that either don't, like newer fans that don't even know this album existed.
It's a dark horse album for 80s hard rock.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe it's a dark horse group, really. Like, since it's
that's
a
good way of putting it. They one and done.
Yeah, I think did John say that at the start? I think he said that.
Yeah, I think
he did.
We'll credit that to him. All right. Well, there you go. We have an average rating here of 8.3. We had a 9 and 2 8s. And yeah, so I mean, it seems to pass muster. It's is that a saying? I can't remember.
Pass muster.
Yeah. There we go. It seems like this album is passed. So we're in support of Through the Fire and HSAS.
It's hard to say. And I just want to add, if somebody's like, oh, Sammy Hagar, oh, Van Halen, the pop stuff in Van Halen, this is heavier than you probably think it's going to be.
Oh yeah,
some of the songs especially.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was actually giving a listen before. I was surprised. I would say I personally would fall probably along the same 8 rating. So anyways, there you go. If you like what you're seeing, if you like discussions about hard rock and heavy metal, please give us a like and subscribe. There's other ways to support the channel, information about that in the description. But most importantly, I want to thank our panelists for being here today. Thanks Tim, thanks Nick, and thanks John. Hope you're enjoying that show you went to right now. And more importantly, I want to thank everyone at home as well. Thank you for being here. We all appreciate you watching. Please join the conversation in the comments below, and whether it's day, morning, or night, have a good one, everyone. Thanks
guys. Thanks.